These data are a little old. I can tell you that they've adjusted slightly. These are the top 10 countries in terms of the value of the organic marketplace on your left, and the top 10 per capita consumption of organic on your right. The 2010 data shows Canada moving up in both of those. So Canada is now the 5th largest country market in the world for organic. And we have the 9th highest per capita consumption of organic in the world. We still have a long way to go compared to Denmark or the US in either of those areas. And we probably won't hit those necessarily because they'll be growing along with us. But I think it's a good story, but it also shows that there's a tremendous opportunity here in Canada, and we're not always connecting the dots from our production and from our producers and our manufacturers to our home consumers, and we backfill a lot of that market with imports, and so we need to look at that and be aware of that as well. I won't spend too much time. This is material I've covered already in this slide, but really, when we're looking at growth that has averaged 20%, it's down back into the low teens now, but capacity is a concern, as I was mentioning, and we are filling a lot of that domestic demand with imports. There's a lot of opportunity, but we need to connect the dots. We need to get together. I was at the beef meeting yesterday, and it was great to see that discussion taking place of, we know the market here, we know the supply here, we've got some gaps in the middle. How do we organize around that? How do we all benefit and all see our needs met and connect and organize? And I think that's a big part of what the organic sector has been successful in doing. I've appeared at the parliamentary committees to talk about our vertical integration, our cooperatives, our businesses that have direct relationships with the producers. And we may not be aware of it, but that's fairly unique in a lot of the food sector in Canada. There's often a gap between the producers and the processors, and they're often at odds with each other. And I think, generally speaking, we have a much more cooperative and collegial marketplace because we've been forced to be segregated and connected to each other through our certification system, through our principles of production. So I think that's another strength that we have that maybe goes under-recognized. Next slide, please. These are the current data. We've dropped in production, and the 2011 data will show an even further drop. We don't even have our full hectares anymore. We don't know the full production rate because that's changing pretty rapidly right now. And we're trying to work with the government, we're trying to work with the certifiers to identify how much is in production and what we have. But we saw a 4.5% decline nationally in 2009. The only areas that saw growth were Quebec and Ontario. Quebec saw growth in producer numbers. Ontario saw a growth in hectares, but a decline in producer numbers. So there was some concentration happening there. But by and large, in Saskatchewan in particular, very concerning, there was a major drop from 2009. And we know some of the reasons for that, but we don't know all of them. And we need to look at what exactly is behind that and how do we correct it. How do we bring new entrants in? How do we encourage young farmers to choose organic? And how do we carry our message and our market opportunity to producers to make sure we have a strong marketplace? We're about just under 2% of total farms in Canada, and we have, I think this number is probably closer to 1,000 now, certified processors and handlers working there, doing things for the Canadian market, they're doing things for export markets, and there's always work to be done in connecting those links along the value chain. But that's really where we are in Canada at production level right now. This is the growth in Canada. We don't have, as I was saying at the beginning, we don't have new information yet on the marketplace. We have a study that was done by the Organic Agriculture Centre of Canada in 2007 that showed $1 billion in annual sales in Canada back in in 2006, we have a similar study that was done by Agriculture Canada that showed in 2008 that it doubled to $2 billion. And we have the regulation that came into place, of course, in 2009. Since the regulation, we don't actually have a comprehensive view of the marketplace. What we did at CODA is we looked at some of the major shares. So we knew that a big piece of what we sell in Canada is imported. We knew that it's fresh fruits and vegetables. And we looked at the import figures that we have for that and looked at the growth trajectory from 08 to 09 to 2010, and we measured that against the other reports that were done on the marketplace, and we were able to estimate with some conviction that the market was worth $2.6 billion in 2010. We're now in 2012, and we don't feel we have the confidence enough to extend that extrapolation to today's market. So I can't tell you what the market is worth right now. So we stay on 2.6 billion, but it's a soft number. We do know that this is about 2.5% of food sales in Canada. This is around the recession or before the recession again, so just keep that in mind. And private labels, so this is store labels that put their own brand on products, are now about 1/5 of the marketplace in terms of organic sales. And that's a pretty significant piece. That's 20%. That's probably grown. If I look at, I go to a lot of the retailers and I scan their shelves, and if I look at what they've got, I'm seeing more and more of that. And so we're probably going in the direction of the United States and the European Union that see about 1/4 of organic sales in their marketplaces are through store brands, through major retailers that are selling, a private label or a white label product. Demand is strong again, we know that very clearly. The consumer is there, the market is there. I think we're seeing a lot of activity here at the trade show with the buyers and sellers. But the supply is getting tighter, and we're already seeing some prices go up, and that's not necessarily a good thing. I know that it's a good thing for people who had to suffer through really bad prices for a few years, but it's also a dangerous situation where we start to see this potential for a peak and valley kind of old agriculture scenario that's not very healthy, not very sustainable for our group. The good news here that I'm really pleased to tell you, and I can't officially announce it yet, but we do have significant investments in place right now and some supports from industry and government to do the first full comprehensive market scan of the Canadian organic marketplace in Canada. So, it's Department of Redundancy Department. The first full Canadian scan of the marketplace with AC Nielsen data, and we'll also have, for the very first time, a look at the consumer. So who is the consumer in Canada? What is their household like? How many kids do they have? Where do they live? Where do they shop? What are they planning to do next year? What are the labels they like? Do they really go for the USDA, or do they go for the Canada Organic logo? Do they go for non-GMO claims? What is driving them? And how does that fit into what we're seeing in the marketplace? So that's really exciting. That data is already being collected right now, and we'll have that early in 2013. So finally, both from the production all the way through to the policy making, we'll have a better sense of where we're at and what game we're playing. So this is what the market looks like in 2008. It's a pretty typical story. About 40% is fresh fruit and vegetables. You see a really strong beverages sector, and that would include your tea and coffee. And dairy and eggs is also pretty strong there with bread and grains. Meat is a tiny piece of that. And I think in the U.S. it's a bit stronger. In Europe it's much stronger. We're also seeing that area as one of the fastest growing. So there's potential there. We're seeing more and more retailers putting organic meat on the shelves. But many of you know who are in that sector, it's a very dynamic and challenging sector as well. And there's a lot of room for growth. Very quickly here, the bottom bar graph basically just tracks some of our top imports year over year. And what you see there is the biggest spike number is coffee. That's green coffee, green beans. We import almost no roasted coffee. We do have some, but relatively to the green, there's very little brought in. And so that's actually a really interesting piece of the puzzle here, in that we have a very strong, small roastery business in Canada that's roasting coffee and distributing nationally or regionally or even in some cases locally. And that's a big part of the organic sector in Canada. That's our single largest import product, and it's green coffee. So there's a lot of business, and you see the brands that are doing well. Some of them are actually roasting in Canada and now starting to supply the US or even European market with Canadian coffee. So it's really interesting, and there's all kinds of surprises when you start looking at this data. The other one, though, the next one is lettuce and the mixed greens. We see a lot of that. We have challenges growing that in January. Look outside, you kind of know why. But there are opportunities there. So anyways, we keep an eye on what's coming in with an eye at just knowing what the market looks like, but also where are some of the opportunities to grow, and I can get you more data on that if you'd like. On the right, on the list here, that's the top 10 grocery items that are sold in Canada. Again, this is from 2008. So we see that soya beverages and milk are right up at the top, yogurt, cereals, and coffee. So those top 5 there, interestingly enough, are all areas that Canada has a major strength in. We grow a lot of soy, we have a lot of soy milk makers here. Milk and yogurt are absolutely Canadian because of our quota and our tariff system. Cereals, we have a pretty strong suit in that area, and coffee, as I just said, is a part of our processing sector. So I find that really interesting, that the 5 top areas is that consumers are buying are areas that we're producing in. And I think that's also an area that we can find some confidence and look forward to growing.